The alien ship hung in space like a crystal flower. Its name was Stellar Dawn, and it was home to 3 very different creatures. They had been watching Earth for many months now, studying the blue planet and all the strange life forms that lived on it. Zephytal stood at the main viewing screen, his crystal skin catching the light from distant stars. He was tall and thin, with arms that could bend in ways that would make humans feel sick. His people, the Kelvani, were known across the galaxy for being smart and careful. They never rushed into anything without thinking first. "The readings are still strange," said Vrix from her station. She looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and big black eyes that never blinked. Her voice came out as clicks and buzzes, but the ship's computer changed it into words the others could understand. "These humans keep doing things that don't make sense." Glurm made a wet, gurgling sound that meant he was thinking. He was short and round, with green skin that was always damp. His people lived in water most of the time, but he wore a special suit that kept him wet while he worked on the ship. "Maybe we need to watch them closer," he said. "From down there, not up here." Zephytal turned away from the screen. For months, they had been taking pictures and recording sounds from Earth. They had learned about cars and cities, about farms and forests. They had watched humans work and play and fight. But something about these creatures puzzled him. "Look at them," Zephytal said, pointing at the screen. It showed a busy street in a human city. People walked back and forth, going about their daily lives. They have no claws, no sharp teeth, no thick skin or strong shells. They can't fly, they can't breathe underwater for long, and they're not very fast. "They are weak," Vrix agreed, soft and slow. How did they take over their whole planet? This was the question that had been bothering all 3 aliens for weeks. Every other world they had studied made sense. The strong creatures ruled. The fast ones caught the slow ones. The smart ones built tools to make up for being small. But Earth was different. On most planets, the rulers were obvious. They were the biggest, the strongest, or the most dangerous. They had sharp claws or poisonous bites or thick armor. But humans had none of these things. They were just normal. Middle-sized, middle-strong, middle-fast. Yet somehow, they had built cities that covered continents and machines that could fly to other worlds. "Maybe they used tools," Glurm suggested. "We've seen their weapons." "Yes, but so do many species," Zephytal replied. "Tools don't explain everything. There's something else, something we're missing." The ship's computer beeped softly. New data was coming in from the sensors they had placed around Earth. Zephytal looked at the numbers and coordinates on his screen. "There are 2 humans in the South American forest region," he said. "They've been there for several days studying plants and animals. They're far from any city or town." Vrix's big eyes turned toward him. "Perfect. We could study them without other humans around to interfere." "It would be a good test," Glurm added. "See how they act when they're alone in nature. Maybe we'll understand them better." Zephytal thought about this. The Galactic Council had strict rules about studying primitive species. They could watch from far away, but they couldn't interfere or make contact. However, they could get closer if they were careful. "We could disable their communication devices," he said slowly. "Make it look like equipment failure. Then they would be truly isolated, acting naturally." "That's allowed under Research Protocol 7, Vrix said, checking the rulebook on her screen. "As long as we don't harm them or reveal ourselves." The plan was simple. They would use their ship's systems to quietly break the humans' radios and phones. Then they would move closer and watch how these strange creatures behaved when they were alone in the wild. Maybe they would finally understand what made humans so special. Zephytal gave the order. Invisible beams reached down from the stellar dawn toward the green forests of Earth. In seconds, every electronic device within 5 miles of the 2 humans stopped working. "It's done," Vrix reported. "They are now cut off from their civilization." "Good," Zephytal said. "Take us down to the upper atmosphere. I want to see everything they do." The ship moved silently through space, getting closer to Earth. Its hull changed color to match the sky, making it invisible to human eyes. Soon they were floating high above the thick jungle canopy. Their sensors focused on 2 small figures far below. Dr. Katie Bell was kneeling beside a stream, filling bottles with water. She was young, with brown hair tied back and clothes designed for jungle work. Next to her, Jake Murphy was setting up their camp for the night. He was older and bigger with strong hands and the kind of face that showed he had spent most of his life outdoors. "Look at them," Zeftal whispered. "So small. So fragile. Any decent predator could kill them in seconds." "Their reaction time is slow," Brix observed, watching the data from their scanners. "Their strength is limited. They have no natural weapons at all. And yet their species rules an entire planet," Glurm added with wonder. The three aliens settled in to watch and wait. They had no idea that their simple observation mission was about to show them something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans. Deep in the jungle below, something ancient and hungry was beginning to stir, drawn by the strange energy signatures from their ship. The stage was set for a discovery that would shake the foundations of galactic science. Katie Bell woke up to silence. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The jungle was never quiet. There should have been birds calling, insects buzzing, and monkeys chattering in the trees. Instead, there was nothing but the sound of her own breathing. She sat up in her sleeping bag and looked around their small camp. Jake was already awake, crouched by the cold ashes of last night's fire. His face was serious, and his eyes kept moving from tree to tree as if he was looking for something. "When did it get so quiet?" Katie asked, keeping her voice low without knowing why. "About an hour ago," Jake replied. "Everything just stopped making noise all at once." Katie reached for her radio to call their base camp, but the device was dead. She tried her satellite phone next, but it wouldn't turn on either. Even her GPS unit showed nothing but a blank screen. "All my equipment is broken," she said, feeling the first touch of worry. Jake nodded. "Mine too. Must be some kind of electrical storm or solar flare. These things happen in remote areas." But Jake didn't really believe that. He had spent 15 years working in wild places, and he had never seen every piece of electronic equipment fail at the same time. Something else was going on. High above them, the three aliens watched from their invisible ship. Zeftal was excited by what he was seeing. The humans were showing signs of stress, but they weren't panicking like most species would when cut off from their technology. "Interesting," he said, making notes on his tablet. "They adapt quickly to equipment failure. Most civilized species become helpless without their machines." "The male is displaying hunting behaviors," Brix observed. "Look at how he moves his head and sniffs the air." "Primitive instincts," Glurm agreed. "Maybe humans aren't as far from their animal past as we thought." Katie packed her gear while Jake studied their map. They had been following animal tracks for 3 days, trying to find a group of monkeys that had been acting strangely. The monkeys kept moving in the same direction, deeper into parts of the jungle that no human had ever explored. "We should go back," Katie said, but she didn't sound like she really meant it. She was a scientist, and the mystery of the strange animal behavior was too interesting to give up on. "We're only 2 days from the target area," Jake said, folding the map. "And we can't call for pickup anyway until our radios start working again." They decided to keep going. Jake led the way, using his machete to cut through thick vines and bushes. Katie followed, taking notes about the plants and trees they passed. But as they walked deeper into the jungle, both of them began to notice that something was very wrong. The trees were bigger here, older and darker. Some of them were species that Katie had never seen before, with bark that looked almost black and leaves that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. The air felt heavier, and there was a smell like old caves and deep earth. "This doesn't match any of our maps," Katie said, looking around with growing concern. Jake stopped walking and held up his hand for silence. He was listening to something, or maybe listening for something that should have been there but wasn't. Above them, the aliens were getting excited readings from their instruments. Frix's claws clicked rapidly as she worked at her control panel. "There are large biosignatures down there," she reported. "Something big is moving underground." "How big?" Zeftal asked. "Class 5 predator, maybe bigger. It's been dormant, but our ship's energy output seems to have woken it up." Glurm's wet skin turned a darker shade of green, which meant he was worried. Should we move the ship away? No, Zeftal said firmly. This is perfect. We'll get to see how humans react to a real threat. This will tell us everything we need to know about their survival abilities. Deep beneath the jungle floor, something that had been sleeping for a very long time was indeed waking up. The creature had been in a state like hibernation, waiting for the right conditions to hunt again. The strange energy from the alien ship had called to it like a dinner bell. It was called a shadow maw, though no human had ever seen one and lived to give it a name. It had been on Earth since before the Ice Ages, hiding in deep caves and only coming out to hunt when it was very hungry. The last time it had fed, humans were still living in small tribes and had not yet learned to make fire. The creature began to move through the underground tunnels it had carved centuries ago. It was 12 feet tall when it stood up straight, with claws that could cut through stone and teeth that could crush bones. Its skin was black as night, and its eyes glowed with a dim red light. Jake felt the ground vibrate under his feet. It was very slight, like a truck passing far away, but there were no roads within 50 miles of where they stood. "Did you feel that?" he asked Katie. Before she could answer, they both heard it, a sound like stones grinding together, coming from somewhere below them. It lasted for about 10 seconds, then stopped. Katie looked at Jake with wide eyes. "What was that?" Jake didn't answer right away. He was thinking about all the stories his grandfather had told him about the old forests, stories about things that lived in the deep places where no light ever reached, stories that he had always thought were just tales to scare children. "We need to find higher ground," he said finally, "and we need to do it now." They started walking faster, but the jungle seemed to be working against them. Vines caught at their clothes, roots tried to trip them, and the path kept leading them downward instead of up. Behind them, something was following, staying just out of sight but getting closer with each step. The aliens watched all of this with great interest. They had seen many species face predators before, and most of them either ran as fast as they could or froze in terror. But these humans were doing something different. They were thinking, planning, and preparing. "Remarkable," Zeftal whispered. "They know they're being hunted, but they're not running blindly." "The male keeps looking back," Rix noted. "He's tracking the predator even while trying to escape from it. And the female is still taking notes," Glurm added with amazement. "Even in danger, she continues her scientific work." As the sun began to set, painting the jungle in deep shadows, Jake and Katie made camp in a small clearing. They built their fire bigger than usual and kept their backs to a large rock formation. Jake had found a good thick branch that could serve as a club, and Katie had her knife ready. They didn't know what was hunting them, but they could feel it out there in the darkness, watching and waiting. The Shadow Maw was being patient, studying these strange new prey before making its move. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything the aliens thought they knew about the soft, weak humans of Earth. The fire crackled and popped in the darkness. Jake fed another branch into the flames, keeping the light bright around their small camp. Katie sat across from him, her notebook in her lap, but her eyes kept moving to the black jungle beyond the firelight. "Something's out there," she whispered. Jake nodded. He had been feeling watched for the past hour. It was like an itch between his shoulder blades, the kind of feeling that made wild animals nervous. His grandfather had taught him to trust that feeling, because it had kept humans alive for thousands of years. "Big," he said quietly, "and smart. It's been following us since this afternoon, but it's staying downwind so we can't smell it." Above them, the three aliens leaned forward at their viewing screens. The Shadow Maw was finally making its move, sliding through the jungle like liquid darkness. Their sensors showed that the creature was massive, easily 3 times the weight of both humans combined. "This should be over quickly," Zeftal said, preparing to record what he expected would be a typical predator attack. "The humans have nowhere to run." "Look at their stress readings," Rix clicked excitedly. "Their heart rates are elevated, but not to panic levels. Most species would be screaming by now." Glurm watched the heat signatures on his screen. "The male's body temperature is rising. Some kind of biological response to threat." The Shadow Maw moved closer. It had been studying these strange creatures for hours, trying to understand what they were. They didn't smell like any prey it remembered. They didn't move like prey either. Most animals that were about to be eaten ran around in circles or froze with fear. But these two were sitting calmly by their fire, alert but not afraid. Jake heard the sound first, a soft scraping like claws on bark. He looked up at the trees around their camp and saw nothing, but the sound came again from a different direction. "It's circling us," he told Katie. "What is it?" she asked, closing her notebook and sliding it into her pack. "I don't know. Something that shouldn't exist." The Shadow Maw decided it had learned enough. It let out a low growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. The sound was so deep that it made the human's bones vibrate. Katie grabbed Jake's arm, but she didn't scream. Then the creature stepped into the firelight. Katie's breath caught in her throat. The thing was huge, standing on two powerful legs with arms that reached almost to the ground. Its claws were longer than her fingers, curved and sharp as razors. Its head was shaped like a wolf's, but bigger, with red eyes that reflected the firelight like mirrors. When it opened its mouth, she could see rows of teeth designed for tearing meat from bones. "My God," she whispered. Up in the ship, all three aliens stared at their screens in shock. The Shadow Maw was even larger than their sensors had indicated. Zeftal quickly checked his database of galactic predators. "Class 6, he said, his crystal skin turning pale. "Maybe Class 7. I've only seen 3 creatures like this in my lifetime, and they were all on death worlds where nothing else could survive. How did something like that evolve on a garden world like Earth?" Vrix asked. The Shadow Maw took a step forward. The humans were trapped between the creature and the rock wall behind them. There was nowhere to run, and their small fire wouldn't keep the monster away for long. Jake stood up slowly, keeping his eyes on the creature. In his right hand he held the thick branch he had found earlier. It wasn't much of a weapon against something that size, but it was all he had. "Katie," he said without looking back at her, "when I say run, you climb that rock wall as fast as you can." "I'm not leaving you," she said. "You're not staying to die," Jake replied firmly. The Shadow Maw tilted its massive head, studying the male human. Most prey animals submitted when faced with a superior predator. They rolled over or ran away or simply froze until death came. But this human was standing up straighter, not cowering. Its heart rate was increasing, but not with fear. With something else. The creature took another step forward, expecting the human to break and run. Instead, Jake did something that surprised everyone watching. He stepped forward too. "What is he doing?" Glurm gasped from the ship. "He's challenging it," Zeftal whispered in disbelief. "A Class 2 species is challenging a Class 7 predator." The Shadow Maw paused. In all its centuries of hunting, nothing had ever challenged it before. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey begged for mercy. Prey did not step forward and raise primitive weapons. Jake could feel something changing inside his body. His vision was getting sharper, and his hearing was picking up sounds he couldn't hear before. His muscles felt stronger, and his mind was becoming very clear and focused. He didn't know that his adrenaline system was flooding his body with chemicals that would let him perform far beyond his normal limits. "Come on then," he said to the monster. "Let's get this over with." The Shadow Maw's red eyes narrowed. It had decided that this strange prey needed to be taught its place. It lunged forward with shocking speed, claws extended to tear the human in half, but Jake was already moving. Years of martial arts training and survival experience had taught him to read an opponent's body language. He saw the creature's weight shift a split second before it attacked, and he dove to the side just as the massive claws swept through the space where he had been standing. Katie screamed and scrambled up the rock wall as fast as she could climb. The Shadow Maw's attack had missed Jake, but it spun around with fluid grace and struck again immediately. This time Jake couldn't dodge completely. The creature's left claw caught him across the chest, tearing through his shirt and leaving 3 deep cuts in his skin. The force of the blow sent him tumbling across the clearing. The aliens expected the fight to be over. They had seen the human get hit, and they knew how much damage those claws could do. But instead of staying down, Jake rolled to his feet and picked up his fallen branch. "Impossible," Vrix clicked in amazement. He should be dead. Jake wiped blood from his chest and faced the creature again. The cuts were deep, but they weren't fatal. He could still fight. More importantly, he could still win. He just had to be smarter and faster than the monster. The Shadow Maw seemed confused by the human's refusal to die. It had killed thousands of creatures over the centuries, and they all died when they were supposed to. But this one was different. This one was still standing, still defiant, still dangerous. Jake began to circle the creature, staying light on his feet. He had fought bears before, and mountain lions, and once a very angry moose. The key was to never let them use their size and strength against you. You had to be faster, smarter, and more determined than they were. "Come on, ugly," he said, raising his makeshift club. Round 2. The real fight was about to begin, and the aliens watching from above were about to learn something about humans that would change everything they thought they knew about Earth's dominant species. The Shadow Maw attacked again, faster this time. Its massive claws swept through the air where Jake's head had been a moment before. But Jake was learning the creature's patterns. He ducked low and swung his branch like a baseball bat, hitting the monster's knee joint as hard as he could. The thick wood cracked against the creature's leg and the Shadow Maw stumbled slightly. It wasn't hurt, but it was surprised. Nothing had ever fought back against it like this before. Jake didn't waste time celebrating the small victory. He rolled away as the creature's other claw came down, leaving deep gouges in the dirt where he had been lying. He came up running, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. "This is impossible," Zeftal whispered from the alien ship. His instruments showed that the human's body was doing things that should have killed him. His adrenaline levels are off the charts. His heart rate is over 200 beats per minute. He should be dead. "Look at his muscle response," Vrix clicked excitedly. "He's performing at 3 times normal human strength. How is his body not tearing itself apart?" Glurm checked his readings twice to make sure they were correct. His pain receptors are shutting down. He's not feeling the injuries anymore. It's like his body has switched into some kind of emergency mode. Katie watched from her perch on the rock wall, unable to look away. She had known Jake for 2 years, had seen him handle dangerous situations before, but this was different. He was moving like a wild animal, using every dirty trick and desperate move she had ever seen. The Shadow Maw spun around to face Jake again, but he was already moving. He had found a sharp rock the size of his fist, and he threw it as hard as he could at the creature's face. The stone hit the monster right between the eyes, and it roared in anger and pain. Jake used the moment of distraction to grab a burning branch from their campfire. The flames hurt his hands, but he didn't care. He swung the burning wood at the creature's face, trying to blind it or at least make it back away. The Shadow Maw swiped at the fire with its claws, knocking the branch away, but Jake was already moving again. He had spotted something that might save his life. A large fallen tree lay at the edge of their camp, and its trunk was covered with broken branches that stuck out like spears. He ran toward the fallen tree with the Shadow Maw chasing behind him. At the last second, he dove and rolled under the trunk. The creature was too big to follow, so it tried to reach him with its claws. But Jake had expected this. As the monster's arm reached under the log, Jake grabbed it with both hands. He twisted the arm and pulled as hard as he could, using the fallen tree as leverage. The Shadow Maw was incredibly strong, but Jake had physics on his side. There was a wet popping sound as the creature's shoulder joint dislocated. The Shadow Maw screamed in pain and rage, a sound that made the jungle itself seem to tremble. It tried to pull its arm free, but Jake held on with the grip of a man who knew he was fighting for his life. "Incredible," Zeftal breathed. "He's using the creature's own strength against it. This level of tactical thinking during combat trauma should be impossible." Jake rolled out from under the log before the creature could reach him with its good arm. The Shadow Maw's left arm was now hanging useless at its side, but it was still incredibly dangerous. It charged at Jake with pure rage in its red eyes. But Jake was ready. He had been watching how the creature moved, learning its balance points and weak spots. When it came at him, he stepped aside at the last moment and kicked the back of its good leg as hard as he could. The kick didn't do much damage, but it sent the already off-balance creature tumbling forward. The Shadow Maw crashed into the rock wall with tremendous force, hard enough to crack the stone. Jake didn't give it time to recover. He jumped onto the creature's back and wrapped his arms around its thick neck. He had learned this move in the military, a chokehold that could stop blood flow to the brain. He had never tried it on anything this big before, but it was his only chance. The shadow maw went wild. It thrashed and spun, trying to throw the human off its back. Its good arm reached, back claws scraping across Jake's shoulders and arms. But Jake held on, squeezing with every bit of strength he had left. 20 minutes, Vrix reported from the ship. The human has maintained a combat hold for 20 minutes. His body should have collapsed from exhaustion 15 minutes ago. His brain chemistry has completely changed, Glurm added in amazement. He's not thinking like a normal human anymore. He's thinking like a pure predator. Katie watched in horror and amazement as Jake rode the monster like a man trying to break a wild horse. Blood was streaming from his wounds. His clothes were torn to shreds and his face was a mask of pure determination. But he never let go. The Shadow Maw's struggles began to weaken. It stumbled and fell to one knee, then to both knees. Its breathing became labored as Jake's arms cut off the blood flow to its brain. The creature that had terrorized this jungle for centuries was slowly losing consciousness. "Hold on, Jake," Katie whispered from above. "Just hold on." The final moments seemed to last forever. The Shadow Maw made one last desperate attempt to throw Jake off, rearing up on its hind legs and falling backward toward the rock wall. If it crushed Jake against the stones, the fight would be over. But Jake had anticipated this move too. At the last second, he shifted his weight and rolled with the creature's fall. Instead of being crushed, he ended up on top of the Shadow Maw as it hit the ground. He tightened his grip one final time. The creature's red eyes began to dim, and its struggles became weaker and weaker. Finally, after what felt like hours but had only been minutes, the Shadow Maw went completely still. Jake held on for another 30 seconds, making sure the creature was truly unconscious. Then he let go and rolled away, gasping for breath. His whole body was shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline, and he could barely stand up, but he had won. Somehow, impossibly, he had defeated a creature that should have killed him in the first 30 seconds of the fight. The three aliens stared at their screens in complete silence. Everything they thought they knew about human beings had just been proven wrong. This wasn't just survival against the odds. This was something completely outside their understanding of how biology worked. "We need to rewrite our entire classification system," Zeftal finally whispered. Jake looked up at Katie, who was climbing down from the rock wall as fast as she could. He tried to smile at her, but his legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees beside the unconscious monster. "Are you okay?" Katie asked, running to his side. Jake looked at the massive creature lying still beside their destroyed campsite. Then, he looked at his own hands covered in blood and still shaking from the fight. "I think so," he said quietly, "but I have no idea how." Neither did the aliens watching from above. But they were about to find out that what they had just witnessed was only the beginning of humanity's surprises. Katie knelt beside Jake, carefully checking his wounds. The cuts on his chest were deep but not life-threatening. His shoulders and arms were covered in scratches from the creature's claws, and his hands were burned from grabbing the flaming branch. But somehow he was alive. "We need to get you to a hospital," she said, tearing strips from her shirt to make bandages. Jake shook his head. "I'll be fine. Humans are tougher than we look." He gestured toward the unconscious Shadow Maw. "What the hell is that thing? I've never seen anything like it." Katie stared at the massive creature. Even unconscious, it was terrifying. Its black skin seemed to absorb light, and its claws were longer than kitchen knives. "It shouldn't exist," she whispered. "Nothing like this has ever been documented." High above them, the three aliens were having an emergency meeting. Their instruments had recorded everything about the fight, and the data made no sense according to everything they knew about biology. "His bone density increased during combat," Vrix reported, her voice full of disbelief. "His muscle fibers became denser. His reflexes improved by 40%. How is any of this possible?" Zeftal was frantically searching through galactic databases. I'm checking every species we've ever encountered. Nothing comes close to these readings. Humans can somehow change their physical capabilities in response to extreme stress. Look at this, Glurm said, pointing to his screen. His body produced 12 different chemicals during the fight. Some of them are natural painkillers stronger than anything in our medical supplies. Others increased his strength and speed. It's like his body became a pharmacy. Zeftal turned away from his computer, his crystal skin now completely pale. We've made a terrible mistake. We classified humans as herbivores because they don't look like predators, but they're not herbivores at all. What are they then? Vrix asked. They're pursuit predators. They don't need claws or fangs because they hunt differently than anything else in the galaxy. They chase their prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Then they move in for the kill. Glurm pulled up images of Earth's history on his screen. Look at their evolution. They didn't develop strength or speed. They developed endurance and intelligence. They can run for hours without stopping. They can go days without food or water. And when they absolutely have to fight, they can become incredibly dangerous. The aliens watched as Jake slowly stood up, testing his injured body. Despite everything he had been through, he was already starting to move normally again. His wounds were bleeding less and his breathing had returned to normal. Accelerated healing, Zeftal noted. Another adaptation we missed. His body is already beginning to repair itself. Jake walked over to the Shadow Maw and studied it carefully. The creature was still breathing, but it would be unconscious for hours. He had choked it just enough to knock it out without killing it. We should get pictures, Katie said, pulling out her camera. The scientific community needs to know about this. No, Jake said firmly. We don't tell anyone about this. Katie stared at him in surprise. Why not? This is the discovery of a lifetime. Jake looked up at the dark jungle around them. Because if word gets out that there are creatures like this in the wild, every government and corporation in the world will come here. They'll turn this place into a zoo or a weapons testing ground. That thing has been sleeping in these caves for God knows how long. Maybe it's better if we just let it keep sleeping. Katie thought about this for a moment, then slowly put her camera away. Jake was right. Some discoveries were too dangerous to share. The aliens listened to this conversation with growing amazement. Not only had the human defeated an apex predator, but now he was choosing to protect it. This level of tactical thinking and long-term planning was unlike anything they had seen from a supposedly primitive species. They're not just physically superior, Zeftal realized. They're emotionally and intellectually superior too. That human just made a decision that shows more wisdom than most Galactic Council members. Vrix was running calculations on her computer. If humans can do this individually, what could they do as a group? What could they do if they knew they were being threatened? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. The aliens had been thinking about making contact with humanity, possibly even conquering Earth if its resources proved valuable, but now they realized they had been thinking about it all wrong. We're not the predators here, Glurm said quietly. We're the prey. Jake helped Katie pack their remaining gear. The Shadow Maw had destroyed most of their camp, but they had enough supplies to make it back to civilization. As they prepared to leave, Jake took one last look at the unconscious creature. Sleep well, old-timer, he said softly. Maybe when you wake up, you'll decide to find a quieter place to live. They walked away into the jungle, leaving no trace that they had ever been there except for some disturbed earth and the lingering smell of their campfire. Zeftal began typing his report to the Galactic Council. His crystal fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he tried to find words to describe what they had witnessed. Species Classification Review, Earth Humans, he wrote. Previous classification as Class 2 herbivore species is completely incorrect. Recommend immediate reclassification as Class 9 apex predator with extreme caution protocols. He paused, thinking about what else to include in the report. Humans do not hunt for food or territory like other predators. They hunt to protect their social groups. They are capable of extreme violence when defending others, but show remarkable restraint when not threatened. They possess adaptive biological systems that allow them to exceed normal physical limitations during crisis situations. Fricks looked over his shoulder as he continued typing. They also demonstrate advanced tactical thinking, long-term planning, and ethical decision-making even under extreme stress. Recommend peaceful contact protocols only. Under no circumstances should human settlements or family groups be threatened, as this may trigger defensive responses that current galactic military forces are not equipped to handle. Glurm activated the ship's engines. "We should leave," Team Deck said. "If that human's equipment starts working again and he detects our ship, he might decide we're a threat to his species." The stellar dawn began to rise silently into the night sky, its hull changing color to match the stars. As they climbed toward orbit, Zeftal added one final note to his report. Additional observation. Humans appear to be unaware of their own capabilities. They consider the events we witness to be unusual rather than normal. This suggests that human civilization is currently operating at a fraction of its potential. Recommend monitoring from safe distance only. Far below, Jake and Katie walked through the dark jungle, following their compass toward home. They had no idea that they were being watched or that their actions had just changed humanity's place in a galactic community they didn't even know existed. "You know what the funny thing is?" Jake said as they walked. "What?" Katie asked. "I used to think humans were pretty average. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, just sort of middle of the road and everything." Katie smiled in the darkness. "And now?" Jake thought about the fight with the Shadow Maw, about the moment when his body had become something more than human, about the strength he had found when Katie's life was in danger. "Now I think maybe we're exactly what we need to be," he said. Above them, the alien ship disappeared into the vast emptiness of space, carrying with it a new understanding of what it meant to be human. And in deep caves beneath the jungle floor, an ancient predator slept on, unaware that it had just helped prove that the meek had indeed inherited the earth.